You float down!
Hello, Stephen King fans. Welcome to episode 1 of We All Watch Down Here, City of Geeks retrospective of the works of Stephen King in film and television. And this, our first real episode after our introduction last time, I'm going to put the link for it right up there, is
You Have a Date with Carrie.
My name is Bob Foster, and as we said in the introduction episode, I will not be the only person talking to you today. Let's go ahead and meet some of the other people I have to talk about Carrie.
Hey Stephen King fans! So today we are going to talk about Carrie, and I have my sweet little Funko Pop of Carrie that I think is the cutest thing in the world to keep me company.
Of course, I can't go a full episode without mentioning Crypticon, so I do want to note on May 3rd through 5th, Dee Wallace from Cujo will be there, and our own Amie Simon will be conducting the interview with her. I'm not sure the exact date and time, but go to CrypticonSeattle.com to check it out. In the introduction episode, I did ask everyone to talk about their favorite Stephen King books, novels, and adaptations, or individual projects, that's what it is. I failed to mention mine, so I'm going to go over those very quickly. I started reading Stephen King a little later than the rest of my group and the rest of people I know. My first Stephen King book was Pet Sematary, which I checked out in my school library, devoured it, and started going into everything after that. I had seen some of the movies, some bits here and there, some full movies. I remember watching The Stand with my mom back in 1994, so it was just before I started reading that. I was born in 1982, so this is probably 1995 or so when I first picked up Pet Sematary. Pet Sematary remains one of my favorites, along with Different Seasons, which I think actually is the greatest collected work of everything together. I know everyone throws the night shift for short stories and novellas, but actually I'm going to go with Different Seasons. But I'm a huge fan of the Dark Tower series, even the later ones where it doesn't come quite as good. And my favorite film work is probably The Green Mile. I've seen it so many times. I still cry like a baby every time I watch it, as noted in the last video. It's always so dusty and full of onions every time I watch that. But we're here to talk about Carrie, so let's go ahead and get right into that. In 1974, Carrie was the first of Stephen King's books to be published. It was apparently the fourth novel he wrote, but the first one to make it to publication. It's been said that Tabitha King, King's wife, rescued the novel Carrie from the trash can when she threw it away. Over time, that story's changed a little bit, make it sound like the whole novel. He actually wrote about the first 3 or 4 pages, the stuff in the shower, when he threw it away thinking he's not the person to write about this. So she picked it up, read it, and said, no, this has enough of a seed. He went ahead, finished it, put it out to the publishers, and they bought it for $2,500, which is, oh, cool. Went and bought a car with that. A few weeks later, he received notice that Doubleday had bought the paperback rights for $400,000, in which, of course, he probably ate shit a brick, got drunk, and quit teaching, leaving him be able to write full-time, leaving us to the volumes and volumes and volumes of novels and short stories and everything that we have now. As it was the first novel to be released, it's really no surprise that Carrie became the first to be adapted when Brian Depalma released his version in November in 1876. Before we discuss the movie, it's probably good if we go over the plot just a little bit, that way you have a full understanding of where everything is. The book and the movie do follow the same plot, so there's not a lot of deviation either way.
Doesn't, take as much of a departure as like Kubrick's The Shining does. I still think it's true to King's original intent.
But for now, this is the very basics. How they tell them is a little bit different, but we'll get to that in just a few minutes. Sissy Spacek plays Carrie White, a high school girl who lives with her psychotic, overbearing, very religious mom, Margaret White, played by Piper Laurie. Carrie discovers that she has psychic powers after an incident in the bathroom when she's showering with her high school gym class when she has her first period. The girls make fun of her, throw tampons at her, and say,
plug it up.
Leading to one of the first iconic points of this movie, of a movie with a lot of iconic moments. The girls all get in trouble for this. One feels bad for it, Sue Snell, and she convinces her boyfriend, Tommy Ross, played by William Catt, to take Carrie to the prom to make up for it, so they realize that she's been awful to Carrie her entire life. Everyone's been awful to Carrie, who's more of a wallflower than she is. Like, one, the teacher says she's a scapegoat, but in the novel and a little bit in the book, we see more she's just in the background. People don't really pay her attention unless she says something and they laugh at her. There's a more direct bullying from Nancy Allen's character, Chris, who is mad that she got in trouble for making fun of Carrie for having her period, and she goes on the warpath to try and destroy Carrie. And when she finds out that Carrie's going to go prom with Tommy, she sets it up so that Carrie will win prom queen so that they can dump a bucket of blood on her, echoing back to the beginning when blood sets this whole thing off. This act sets Carrie into a psychotic rage in which she kills many of the people at the prom, leaving Sue really the only person left to live. She kills the bullies in their car, goes back to her house where her mom's going to kill her because now she's aware of her psychic abilities and now thinks she's of the devil. She kills her mom to help protect herself and then bleeds out as the house burns down around her, leading into the final sequence where Sue has a dream in which she approaches Carrie's grave and her hand comes up and ends the movie ending in a big jump scare. Carrie was released in November of 1976 and it was a huge commercial and critical success, which is a great way to start your film adaptation, especially since over time Stephen King adaptations became kind of a joke. But to start out so strong with a fantastic novel with a fantastic response, it made about $14 million in the first 2 months of release. That's not a lot now, it's a drop in the bucket now, but in $1976 that was a ton. Everyone seemed to like it. There's a couple negative reviews that I did read. For the most part, it's solid work that incredibly well received. It became iconic. If it wasn't for Carrie doing well, we might not have had The Shining and Salem's Lot's TV movie, and other the big things that came afterwards. It was a great litmus test to see how well King was able to be adapted, and it struck well. I love this movie. I'm going to go into all the reasons why. This movie is fantastic. Even Sissy Spacek and Pepper Laurie were both nominated for acting Oscars for their portrayals of Carrie and Margaret White. Neither won, but they have become iconic roles since then for both of them.
I think that it's the perfect adaptation and kind of a perfect metaphor for high school. Yeah, it's just far too fun and horrible and delightful. And how often can you watch a movie where the hero is also the monster and you can both cheer and be horrified at the same time?
The film was written by Lawrence Cohen. Now this is not Larry Cohen, who made Phone Booth, Bone, Cue the Winged Serpent, Return of the Salem's Lot, and It's Alive. We'll see both of these men later on in this series for things that they have worked on within the Stephen King universe outside of Carrie. For Larry Cohen didn't actually work on this movie, but the names on there makes me always get them mixed up. Now this Lawrence Cohen isn't really known for a lot of work outside of this. He did in 1988 try to make a musical adaptation to Carrie, which is noted for how bad it bombed hard. Which did come back in 2011, 2012 for a new version. I've never seen it. I've listened to the soundtrack a couple times, so I don't really have much to say about it. I'll just leave it at that. The information's all out there for you to find if you're more interested in this, like, asterisks when it comes to Carrie of this musical. Ultimately, Cohen's script eschews the structure of the novel. The novel is told half epistolatory. I'm messing up how to say that. I'm just gonna leave it there. Now, half of the book is told that way. Often when I see it written about, it said as if the entire thing is. That's not entirely true. Half is told epistolatory. So okay. I'm gonna put it right down there so you can see exactly what the word is. What that means is when a story is told with diary entries, interviews, stuff looking back at it in that way. Dracula is told in that way, with everyone's diary entries along with news articles, and half of Carrie is told that after everything's already happened. It kind of leads out with something really bad happened in Chamberlain, Maine in the novel, Bates, Ohio in the movie, and then the other half is telling Carrie's story as Carrie's story continues. The first draft of the screenplay did attempt to keep this style on with flashbacks of Sue Snell telling a story to the White Initiative along with other flashaways and cutaways, but ultimately decided that was too complicated to try and adapt into film. So Depalma was able to influence the producers to have go and rewrite the script so it would be more straightforward, which is actually how we get it. I think it works better that way.
Grady Hendrix points this out in his great Stephen King reread, is that when the book came out, it was sensational in a lot of ways because it was not idyllic in the same way that a lot of books about teenagers at the time were. This is a book with pimples and breasts and period blood. This is a very different world, and honestly one that is probably a little bit more reflective of everyday life and of the tremendous burden that it is to be a teenager and to be in high school.
More notable is the director Brian De Palma.
So I am a huge Brian De Palma fan just in general. Carrie was the second movie of his I saw. The first movie I saw was Dressed to Kill when I was way, way, way too young to see it.
Depalma's work's is well known to most film fans. Maybe a little bit into the general public might recognize the name for a couple of things he's done, Scarface. I have seen most of Depalma's work. He's a very divisive director. I can see why people wouldn't like him. I can see why people love him. There's definitely a lot of problematic aspects in much of his work, but that's not a discussion for here, a discussion for a different time with a different place. But I'm going to put that out there. This was released in the same year as Obsession, which is also 1976, a few months earlier. I'm not sure which was made first, so we'll say his previous film before either of those, whatever one came out, was actually made first, was Phantom of the Paradise, which I have to throw out because it's one of my favorite movies of all time. Faust Family Opera with a musical featuring Paul Williams doing the score and the music, so many amazing songs. Check out Phantom of the Paradise if you've never seen it. It's gonzo, it's crazy. It's much more jokey than anything else he's ever made since, but to me, it's my favorite Depalma movie and one of my top 10 movies of all time. It's interesting to me that the first Stephen King adaptation remains to be one of his most iconic. I believe if you were to ask any random person on the street, give me an image that you know of Stephen King, just a still shot of a movie, television show, or just simply in part in a book, not a full scene, not a character, not a title, but an image of Stephen King. And I think one of the top results would be Carrie White covered in blood at the prom. You know, today we talk a lot about spoilers. I'm big of avoiding spoilers or things I'm not familiar with. Even I'm avoiding the trailers for Pet Sematary now because I know there's a big change that comes out next week as I record this. And even if I've read that book a zillion times, I don't know what they're changing in the movie, so I'm avoiding all that from that. I already sold on it, that's it. So it's really odd to me that when they promoted the movie, they really focused on Carrie at the prom. And this is the main poster image when it came out, was Carrie covered in blood. You know it's going to happen from the beginning, that at some point she's going to go to prom covered in blood. It's in the original trailers, which I'll show to you right now.
For everyone else, it will be a nightmare. Carrie. A new film by Brian Depalma. Based on the chilling bestseller.
And yeah, we're not worrying about spoilers at all, right? And you can feel it as you watch the movie that I felt like it's made knowing where this is going. It's odd to come into a movie saying, this is where it's going to end. Everyone coming in knows where it's going to end. Now we just have to get that set up to get there without actually starting with her covered in blood and then flashing back. It's kind of assumed. I'd like to actually watch the movie with someone who doesn't know the ending and seeing where they think it's going, asking them for like a running commentary and what's being set up, where things are going, and where it's ultimately going to pay out at. I don't think there's anyone out there who doesn't know where this goes. It's so much in culture now of Carrie at the prom that it's almost impossible not to approach it from that way. And I think it even seemed like it was. The first time I saw it, I knew that's where it ended. I just didn't know the details heading up to it. It was on TBS or TNT. They didn't, now I look back, it doesn't actually have to cut out very much. Probably just cutting off a little bit of Carrie in the tub or anything like that. Because the blood isn't too much. It probably cut away a little bit when Margaret was stabbed. I'm not sure exact time. It was like right before I started reading. I think me watching this was the impetus from picking up Pet Sematary from the library. I don't know why I didn't pick up Carrie, but I picked up Pet Sematary first. So this is right before jumping fully into King, getting on that obsession. No Brian Depalma pun intended. 12 or 13-year-old Bob was a little disappointed about what he saw. He expected maybe a little more blood, a little more death too. I'm not exactly sure what me of 20-something years ago thought, but I do remember turning it off and that was kind of underwhelming. Older me knows younger me was wrong. Like I said, I love this movie and I appreciate it now. I didn't appreciate it then, and I was thinking of why as I watched it this time, as I've seen it other times. Essentially, it's a character drama that leads to a horrific climax with the big moments there, but if you even take out the supernatural stuff, you just have someone who's trying to find herself in a world that's kind of against her. It's kind of driven the line where where it wants her to be, and she's trying to break out of that, despite all the forces against her, whether it be her mom or the bullies.
The mother-daughter relationship. It's operatic, it's hyper dramatic, melodramatic even, but it's really effective. I can't help but relate it to my own experience of growing up in a religious family and feeling these tremendous biblical stakes attached to your decisions. And I think that really comes across in this adaptation, that feeling of wanting on the part of Carrie to be free and to explore and to push boundaries, while at the same time being terribly frightened of both this conceptual horror of damnation and this very real horror of an overbearing parent.
It's those character interactions that I think that make the film work. Character is well drawn, well written, and separated out, and they're really well performed by everyone involved. I mentioned Spacek and Piper Laurie being nominated for Oscars.
It's crazy to think that Sissy Spacek was 27 when she made this movie, playing this shy teenager who's discovering her telekinetic powers when she gets pushed too far, but she's so good.
It's been said that Carrie Fisher almost got the part that Sissy Spacek was originally cast as Leia, and Carrie Fisher was cast as Carrie. I don't quite see this because they're two completely different styles of actresses who wouldn't be fit for either of those roles. What is it, Carrie in Star Wars is said to be auditioning at the same time that Depalma and Lucas are both there, and that's who they chose, and they talked about it and switched. That seems a little too much story-like as a story to tell about it than truth, but I do need to look into that to find out. But something that they've been telling for 30 years, so it might be true. Now, Piper Laurie is the complete opposite of Sissy Spacek's take on Carrie. She's completely unhinged, and she's wonderful to watch in this. She's said in interviews that she's taken the movie as a comedy, and that's how she approached the role. And I think it really worked for her in that case. If she approached this role seriously, it'd be accidentally over the top. The character is so much of a caricature of that type of person that approaching it in the way that she did was the right set this right amount of tone, right amount.
She's so hysterical yet somehow restrained at the same time. Nancy Allen as Chris Hargensen is perfect. PJ Souls in there as Norma, her BFF. John Travolta as Billy is pretty great. I mean, I am not a person who thinks that John Travolta is a great actor, but he's pretty good in this role. Betty Buckley as the teacher. I love Betty Buckley. I love her. She's amazing on Preacher, by the way. If you haven't watched the last season of Preacher, she just blows me away in that.
PJ Souls is the one who got Joel to this role after they were together in The Boy with the Plastic Bubble a few years previous. Souls was cast first. She knew Depalma, and then she said, I know this guy, he'd be great for it. I think he might have been on Welcome Back, Kotter at the time. Maybe it's just before that, but it definitely is an early big role for him. He would appear again in other De Palma movies, so would Nancy Allen. And also recognizable is Edie McClug, who you've seen in everything in the 80s, being super sweet and wonderful.
They all adore him. They think he's a righteous dude.
Here being more of a background character, says a couple lines, she is still on the anti-Carrie end of things. And of course, William Catt and his hair. All that glorious angelic hair. That hair is the greatest American hero of this movie. De Palma gives a great look to the movie. It almost has a dreamlike quality for all. It's a soft focus with these long hands and these angelic voices, and it really feels otherworldly in many cases, especially at the end, which we'll get to in a moment. He loves those panning shots as he goes across. But being De Palma, he has a lot of different shot choices, all of which feel incredibly designed to get the feeling you need. I love the moments where a person's up close to the camera and someone else is further back. So there's William Catt and Carrie in the English classroom. There's a couple other examples of that. The fast motion where they're trying on the tuxes, and particularly the very De Palma, and what would become one of De Palma's signatures of the split screen as the prom goes ape shit, as Carrie I always think as a Carrie kind of seeing everything now, seeing this, seeing that, and kind of reacting to everything. And of course the opening scene, then the credits where he pans across the locker room, almost in a leering-like way with these angelic soundtrack that almost feels like something like a softcore porn or later Porky's, that it gets...
Of course, it's Brian De Palma, and I want to say like 90% of Brian De Palma movies open with a shower scene in which there are a lot of naked women frolicking around in the shower.
With the blood sequence right after that, it's like here's leering, and then bodies, 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 and then blood. This great juxtaposition that sets up everything else that comes out later. And the dance sequence at the prom is as dizzying it is for Carrie as it is for us, as it goes around and around and around her and William Cat. This camera moving as they're going the other direction. It's beautiful. It gets to kind of the feeling of what Carrie's feeling at this time. That so much of her sequences really get into her head with, because she doesn't get to talk a lot, so it's all in her look, and it's all how Depalma frames where she's looking and how she's acting. Really gets in her headspace with camera use, and that's really impressive. The prom is filmed with so much tension. You know what's going to happen. You know it's still going to allow to happen. The entire movie, you know it's going to lead up to the prom, but you still feel that tension, especially as it's closer and closer to the moment. And you have the quick shots as they start to figure, as Snell and the teacher start to figure out what's going to happen, then followed up with the slow motion of it happening. The quickness and then the slow motion together create that. It's hard to put that feeling into words. And I love the dresses and zucks at the prom. They are so ugly. They're wonderful. Here's some of my favorites right there. They almost look like nightgowns that they just threw on and came to prom with. I don't know what designs were in the 70s, but maybe you deserve to burned up. Perhaps almost as iconic as the scenes of Carrie at the prom and covered in blood is that ending sequence in which Sue Snell approaches Carrie's grave in a dream.
Of course, the last, nightmare scene, man, I cannot.
She approaches Carrie's grave with Carrie White burns in hell written on it, and then Carrie's hand bursts up, scaring her and effectively end the movie on a jump scare. If you look carefully, you see the scene is filmed backwards. If you look right over there on the side, you can see that car moving backwards up the street, and this creates this weird dreamlike quality, as I mentioned earlier, with the opening scene having the dream-like feel. It creates everything weird. It doesn't feel quite right, and of course you know it's a dream sequence when you watch it the second time, and you know that jump is coming, but still an effective scare. Val Lewton and Jacques Tourneur and Cat People may have invented the jump scare with a Lewton bust. That may have created the jump scare for cinema, but Carrie definitely brought it back. This is the first of the new era of horror films to get that jolt at the end to be an effective tool.
Like holds up, and it's beautiful and tragic, and I'm still Team Carrie. I still feel for Carrie White. I still get it. I still get that she was just pushed too far by these bullies, and they, for the most part, got what they deserved.
As I close up talking about Carrie, I have a question to ask you. How much do you think Carrie is in control of her powers at the end of the movie? Is she actively killing everyone there, or is it a more animalistic, just zoning out and going to revenge mode? I've asked this to my other panelists and see what they think, and give me your thoughts down in the comments.
I think she's just pushed too far, and it's like an automatic trauma response, right? An automatic abuse response. Her first response has always been flight, but at this point she's realized she can flex and fight back, so it turns to fight. And I think initially it's probably that she's just has like a flash of trauma and anger and starts like blowing shit up, and then it just passes a point of no return, and she just kind of like shrugs it like, well, I'm in it too far now. I've probably killed more than half these people, so I should just keep going. Of course, and I do think like when she encounters Chris and Billy in the car, that is a deliberate, like, this is all your fault. I'm gonna murder all y'all like immediately.